Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Lawyers with Attitude. I'm Judy Ramjeet.
I'm Julian Young.
And we are English solicitor advocates, but we'll be talking about legal topics worldwide and try to show that in fact the law impacts on every aspect of one's life. In this week's episode, we'll be talking about the law in relation to double jeopardy in Hong Kong and comparing it with the law as it stands currently in the United Kingdom. We'll then be interviewing James Desborough, who's a well-known show business journalist currently based in Los Angeles. And then finally, we'll be talking about strange laws worldwide. Julian, firstly, in relation to the law relating to double jeopardy, what's the situation in the United Kingdom?
Until relatively recently, double jeopardy, effectively being tried twice for the same offence, was forbidden. So that someone who'd been acquitted of murder couldn't stand trial for a second occasion. In 2003, the Criminal Justice Act was passed by the last administration, a nice big long act to give lawyers many sleepless nights, and they decided that in exceptional circumstances, and that's really very much the word to remember, exceptional circumstances, if there was new and compelling evidence which wasn't available for the original trial, and it was in the interests of justice, and the failure to produce that evidence wasn't due to sloppy prosecuting or serious fault on the part of the prosecution, then a second prosecution could take place. The main case we all know about is the Stephen Lawrence murder case, when two people were convicted some 17, 18, 19 years after the original trial collapsed.
Julian, what's the situation in relation to double jeopardy in other countries, most other countries?
Most other countries have an absolute bar on prosecution for a second occasion after an acquittal has taken place. The jury has made a decision. China, and especially Hong Kong, is looking into that afresh. In fact, their law commission has looked into the law and has decided effectively to follow England. Now, this is a bit odd, because you'd have thought, having handed over sovereignty to the Chinese authorities, they'd keep in touch with Chinese law. But it would appear that the Hong Kong authorities think that our model is a good one and should be followed. There is one huge caveat.
And what's that?
The enormous caveat is the defendant, who may be asked, as may indeed his witnesses, many, many years after an acquittal, to account for what happened, what documents they had at the time, what their lawyers had written down at the time, which of course may have been destroyed because lawyers don't keep documents indefinitely. Undoubtedly, the defendant is put at a tremendous disadvantage. So the court, when deciding whether to allow a retrial in double jeopardy law, really has a very difficult balancing act. There's only one case that's so far really hit the law report. That's the case of Dobson, which was heard last year, which the Lord Chief Justice allowed. This was the Stephen Lawrence murder case, allowed a retrial for the one defendant who had already been acquitted. Nobody has yet looked at the effect on the defendant, not the publicity point, because that's not irrelevant any longer, on the defendant if he has not got the tools available to properly defend himself. That's a time bomb that is ticking away unhappily in the background beneath all the changes in the law.
So Julian, you've expressed a number of concerns about law relating to double jeopardy and retrying a defendant. However, what are the advantages?
Another disadvantage, we've gone to the advantages. Another disadvantage is that there is no finality for a defendant if he or she is acquitted by a jury.
But what about the victim? That's what some people might be more worried about.
The victim is not at the centre of the criminal justice system. Forget what the politicians say. The defendant is at the centre of the criminal justice system, because it is the defendant who stands the risk of being convicted and, especially in a serious matter, going to prison. And the interests of justice are, and must be, that a person is never wrongfully convicted. It was said that if 10 people who are charged and 9 of them are acquitted because of an error, that's as bad as if 10 people are charged and only 1 of them is acquitted due to an error. It's wrong. If 10 people are acquitted because of an error or because a jury aren't sure, that is justice. If 9 people are convicted when they're not guilty. The criminal justice system has failed. We have an example of how new and compelling evidence, of course, can go in favour of a defendant.
I think I know the case that you might be talking about.
Well, yes, it
Julian.
just might be the case of Sean Hodgson, which you and I worked for approximately a year to secure his acquittal, in other words, the quashing of his conviction for murder. And that was due to new and compelling evidence, evidence which was not and could not have been available for the original trial because DNA wasn't in use until 1986 and he was tried in 1982. And that is perhaps one advantage and shows why the new and compelling evidence rule is extremely important and should always work.
So, Julian, as I understand it, currently the Law Commission in Hong Kong is proposing that the legislation in the United Kingdom should be adopted in effect in Hong Kong. But if that does happen, what are the lessons that the Hong Kong judiciary can learn about the double jeopardy rules applying in our country?
The main lesson for the Chinese authorities, People's Republic of China, is that they will have to look long and hard and carefully for allowing a retrial after an acquittal. Because of the finality, because it is not fair on the defendant at the end of the day, and also to ensure that there is no sloppy prosecuting which allows the prosecution to have a second or third or fourth bite of a cherry. And therefore, although they may not be used to these concepts because they're very much Anglo-Saxon based, the concept that the defendant is deemed to be innocent until proven guilty by a judge or a jury, as the case may be, the concept that there has to be finality at the end of the case if at all possible, and that the defendant has most definitely a number of basic human rights is something they're going to have to grapple with as China moves from what's been relative isolation now into the 21st modern century in which we now live, in which law plays such a very big part.
Now, for the benefit of our international viewers, some of you may know that G and I will actually be giving a lecture on the lessons to be learned about double jeopardy in the United Kingdom to the students and members of the public in Hong Kong, and our lecture will be on the 19th of April at the University of Hong Kong. I hope that some of our viewers will be able to attend the lecture, and we very much look forward to giving it, and we're very appreciative to be asked to come along to the University of Hong Kong to give a lecture on the law in relation to double jeopardy, because it's clearly a very interesting subject. Later on in our show, we'll be talking to the entertainment journalist James Desborough. He's based in Los Angeles and he's got a host of very interesting celebrity gossip, which also shows the rules and ethics that journalists have to abide by in entertainment journalism.
Do you think, having seen the Leveson inquiry, there are rules and ethics for journalists? We are being controversial now, aren't we?
Well, Julian, I know you like a bit of controversy. And finally, towards the end of the programme, we'll be talking about strange laws worldwide. Last week we talked about very strange laws that still exist in this country, such as it being illegal to eat mince pies on Christmas Day, but we don't want to leave out the rest of the world. So there's a lot to look forward to in the rest of the show. This week's guest on LWA.TV is that well-known entertainment journalist, James Desborough. Thank you for joining us this week, James.
It's lovely to be here.
Well, James has flown over from Los Angeles, where he's currently based, and he's covering quite a number of interesting stories, which we're hoping to hear the latest gossip about, with, of course, a legal element to it, for our more serious-minded viewers. So, James, just a quick recap about your career. I understand you joined the News of the World newspaper in 2005, and in next week's episode, we'll be talking about the phone hacking scandal there. But in 2005, you joined the News of the World, and in 2009, you were awarded Showbiz Journalist of the Year.
Yes, that's right, yeah. The equivalent, I suppose, of the Oscars in our industry. If you're going to win an award and your specialist field is showbiz, then that's the award to win, and I was very lucky to win that award.
Oh, that's
Oh,
great.
I don't think luck played a part. I have a feeling pure skill played a part, and the ability to find information.
Well, that's very kind of you, but there's an element of luck as well, depending on what the judges and the peers think about your work at that time. It was an amazing year in terms of stories breaking.
Oh, fantastic. And I understand you also interviewed, you did an expose of Sharon Osbourne when she was a judge in the X Factor, British X Factor.
Well, this is another story that comes from, as Julian mentioned earlier, just people speaking with people. And her brother, David Arden, had been, essentially, they'd had a number of traumas over the years where they kind of got on, they hadn't got on. And Sharon's father died, and Sharon had had a huge falling out with her father. And that led then to a falling out with her brother over where he should be buried. And then the pair didn't speak. And then David decided that he'd had enough of years of essentially, he felt, being essentially pushed under the radar so that Sharon could go off and project her career, and she said certain things about the family which David just said, I've had enough, I want to give my side of the story.
So in other words, you were giving a balance to a story that was in the public domain already.
Yes, Sharon had released an autobiography. I think by that stage she may have released her second autobiography, where she discussed a number of aspects about her father, her childhood, and David wanted to put his view across that I don't remember it happening like this. And these are the funny things that Sharon did during the course of her career. And it turned into essentially another story which should have been a couple of pages and then became 2 weeks worth of stories.
Which is great.
Did you feel that you were in fact performing a service? In other words, giving somebody who perhaps didn't have the profile the opportunity of putting their side of a story, whether what they said was right or wrong is neither here nor there for the purpose of the argument. But did you feel that was a service you were giving, a fair service to somebody who would otherwise effectively be unheard?
I mean, with the showbiz stories, I think that there's a large element of giving people a right to reply on certain things, because when you are a celebrity and in the public eye, the nature of the world today, you know, your agents know, and the people who you work with know that you're putting yourself forward and presenting a certain image. Sharon had done that, and I would agree that there was an opportunity for David to give his version, his right to reply to the story. And actually the thing about David that struck me most of all was that I remember sitting with David for a week before I even wrote a word, and it was as if he was recalling his life story, and he wasn't particularly bitter towards Sharon. It was very much a case of, I just want to tell the world how I saw it from my perspective. And quite a lot of the time, he was not rolling around, but laughing quite openly about the funny things that had happened and how she saw things and how he saw things. And it was an astonishing interview process.
And in 2009, after you were awarded the Showbiz Reporter of the Year, you then moved to America, where you became the US editor of the News of the World. And when you were there, you interviewed Britney Spears' manager.
Minder. So this was a little bit before. Actually, what happened was it another thing where there's a question of speaking to contacts, and I had some good contacts in Los Angeles. And Britney Spears at the time was going through the infamous meltdown. You know, the time when she shaved her hair. When she was seen in public unable to perform, miming, generally going off the rails, and people were putting a lot of that down to stress. And again, it was a case of her management and her PRs presenting an image. She's just okay, everyone's blowing this out of proportion. And it got to a stage where one of her security guards felt the need to say, enough's enough. This is what I've seen. I'm sorry, I'm doing this not because I want to cash in on her, it's because I feel that if this goes any further, the children in her care could suffer and could potentially die. And before he came to us, he actually handed in a report to the Los Angeles Child Services Department, and because of that, the Child Services Department then started investigating, which led eventually to her, for a brief time, losing custody of the children. Now, the interesting thing about that guy was that he wasn't proud about doing that. It wasn't something that he sat there gloating for. He was actually deeply disturbed by it all, and very much so because he was a father himself, and he actually adored Britney. When Britney was not drunk or not apparently out with the fairies, he really got on well with her and was really upset that this was going on.
And it looks like she's got over that stage of her life, and she's
had now conservatorship. Her father's been looking after her, and in the next few weeks it's probably likely that she will maintain and regain some kind of financial control of her life.
So that's great for Britney.
Yeah.
But now you're basically permanently stationed in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
And one of the first big scoops that he had was the death of Michael Jackson. You were involved in.
It was the first week in the job.
Wow.
It was an astonishing few months on Michael Jackson, because I'd been in the UK preparing for my trip to America, and one of the aspects of the big American move was that Michael Jackson was, of course, coming to England to launch his comeback. He was going to be in England, but he was rehearsing, in inverted commas, in Los Angeles. And I had a number of contacts who were saying to me, "This is, you really can't believe this. He's not rehearsing. He's been shopping. He's done this. He hasn't done that." And we just at every step of the way, the management of Michael Jackson would shoot down these suggestions, say this is not true, he's been in full rehearsal. Of course, 4 days into my job, I remember getting a text. Michael Jackson, I remember the same contact who told me about before, Michael Jackson going to hospital, and I think it was about 12, maybe it was something like 12:15, it was actually before he'd even gone in the ambulance to the hospital. Michael Jackson's dead.
Oh my goodness, I still.
That's right, and it was like, okay, my week's got a bit livelier now. And then that was the norm for the next. Well, essentially throughout my whole time working for the News of the World, we were breaking a raft of stories on people who knew about Michael Jackson's problems, were involved with him, and who'd remained silent for years.
And you covered the subsequent trial, didn't you?
Yes, I was there when Conrad Murray was found guilty of manslaughter and given 4 years.
James, one of the questions we've got to ask obviously is the morality of what you're doing. For example, what do you do if you think you're being sold a complete pack of lies, a story that someone's made up to get their own back, to push themselves forward and say something which is untrue? How do you judge?
Well, I think the majority of stories which I was involved in, I found that cross-checking, going through what's been said in the past, whether, let's say, if we're dealing with a manager or a PR that has perhaps not quite given the full picture before, and you know they've got a history of not presenting that way. If you've got someone who's coming to you fresh and saying, okay, I'm going to say this, I'm going to say that, the likelihood of you presenting that story straight off the bat is very low, unless it's in a situation where that person is clearly linked to a star and there is clearly an obvious point that this person wants to do a story and doesn't have an axe to grind, doesn't have what you would describe as a reason to financially benefit from it. And I actually found the majority of times dealing with sources, and this is I think where we're going,
yes,
the vast majority of sources have never been money motivated. You find sources through speaking to people. That's how sources come about. You don't often get people ring you up and say X, Y and Z is happening. I mean, obviously that's happened in the past,
but by and large you will go and fish around the people you know who may have a link somewhere to
people.
The story.
Yeah, people talk. And I think that one of the interesting things about modern journalism especially, and an element of modern investigative journalism, is that the story always starts from somebody inside the camp, the inner circle, handing information over or talking about certain information. Because if activities that would make a tabloid story weren't revealed by that person, then the story would never come out.
Now, James Desborough used to work for the News of the World newspaper, part of News International's stable of newspapers. And as our viewers may know, last year the News of the World was closed down by Mr. Murdoch himself due to a scandal that erupted in Britain about phone hacking. James, at the time, was working as the US editor of that paper, and subsequent to the closure was sadly arrested. He was the 13th person to be arrested who worked for the News of the World, and the first person, and so far I understand James, the only person who was based in America at the time. So James, would you like to talk a little bit about your arrest last year?
Well, I think I was the 13th person and the only person who's working in the USA. It came out of the blue, my arrest. I had a phone call from the police and I spoke with Julia.
Yes.
And we attended Bromley police station and you were completely open with the police.
Yeah, I had nothing to hide.
You gave them your personal details, access to your personal data on computers, and played a straight bat, I think you can say.
Yeah, I followed your advice, and it was a case of I will answer your questions. There we go.
As I recall, they only asked you effectively 2 or 3 questions about what part, if any, you'd played in a name, James, on a couple of pieces of paper. But they spent a lot more time talking about something else, didn't they?
Well, that aspect of that day, I've always felt that it was best for you as my lawyer to talk about. There may be a time in the future when I discuss what happened, the matters discussed and the wider area, but I feel the way that you've handled my situation has been exemplary.
Very kind.
And I feel that when it comes to dealing with those matters, you're the best person to talk about that. It's not that I'm avoiding the issue, I just feel more comfortable with you discussing those matters.
Of course, we all know now that the police have decided there is absolutely no evidence against you, and in fact they cancelled your reappearance on bail before it took place. Must have been a great relief to you.
Yeah, I was delighted, and the one aspect that I look back on now is that my career was on hold for 8 months due to that, and I'm just looking forward to getting on with my career.
Back in America.
Back in America.
And do you intend to exercise your right of reply through the media who initially reported certain things about you after your arrest?
I think that especially in America there is a lot of work to be done. It's no secret, looking at the internet, that there are still many stories which have left the original story up about the arrest, and I feel that there's time to work on that and make sure that I'm given the right to reply.
Doing what you do to other people, namely exercising that right for your response and your voice to be heard. Do you think the American media is ready for a very British approach, the British fair play approach?
I hope so. I actually enjoy the US media. I really enjoy the websites. I love the newspapers over there. And the television stations are, I don't know the best way to describe it is that they've got very good journalism, very good journalists, and at the same time they've got exceptionally good, buoyant news programmes. In England we don't quite have that. We have a lot of kind of a mixture of either pretty hard news or pretty softer kind of magazine programmes. In America they hit a really good fine line. Shows like Today, Good Morning America, they have a lot of light and a lot of kind of darker, tougher news stories. And I love the American media, love the stories they break, and I've always had a great and high regard to them.
Well, James, thank you very much indeed for joining us, And again, I wish you all the very best for the future.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Jay. So thank you to James Desborough, entertainment journalist currently based in Los Angeles, for giving us a bit of celebrity gossip. Finally, to wrap up the show.
Well, yes, the moment has now arrived for the hilarity. What on earth do foreigners' laws say? It's good fun looking at English law. You, for example, until relatively recently, couldn't put a postage stamp upside down on a letter, otherwise you would get a visit from the police because it was a criminal offence. But in France, for example, it is forbidden to call a pig Napoleon.
Really? Why do you think that is the case?
Well, I suspect it's something to do with a rather sort of slightly chubby emperor who had delusions of grandeur and who lost at the Battle of Waterloo and was such a hero figure that you couldn't dare have a porcine creature named after him. In Indonesia, there are all sorts of penalties. I think one of them is for masturbating in public, you can be decapitated. That's quite interesting. A little bit extreme, perhaps. In Ohio, it's against the state law to get a fish drunk. I would have thought the fish, in fact, drink in water, but obviously I'm wrong about that, and somebody somewhere thought it was appropriate. In England, we still have ridiculous rules. You can't carry a corpse in a cab.
Well, I think I can top that, Julian, because apparently in Belgium it's illegal to wear a red hat while walking down the street. And in Germany, apparently every office must have a view of the sky.
Well, I assume that doesn't mean some particular subscription television program.
No, Julian. We'll talk about the Murdoch inquiry another time.
And there's a lovely one here. I've got these obviously off the internet, the trustworthy internet, as we all know. In a place called Oblong, which is in the state of Illinois in America, apparently it's illegal to make love whilst fishing or hunting on your wedding day.
Well, Julian, I notice you rather like the more risque laws, but for the sake of our viewers who are not like-minded, I might remind them that in Italy, a man may be arrested for wearing a skirt, and in Norway, it's illegal to kill a mouse unless it's for consumption. So, Julian, I think enough of the strange worldwide laws. It's that time again.
The time has arrived for the joke, and it's the
Joke
shortest.
of the week.
It's the shortest joke in the world.
Well, I can hardly wait.
There were two women sitting quietly.
Dear viewers, I'm so sorry, but if any of you want to send emails to either Julian or myself, please do so. You can contact me on my email address, which is judyramjeet@jylaw.co.uk,
or Julian Young at jylaw.co.uk, or look us up on our website www.jylaw.co.uk, the finest legal website in the Marylebone area of London, if not in the universe.
And just to remind our viewers, we'll be giving a lecture on the 19th of April at the University of Hong Kong about the law relating to double jeopardy, and we hope as many of you possible can attend that lecture. In the meantime, thank you for watching.
It's goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from me, Lawyers with Attitude.